Welcome, everyone. My name is Segal. I'm the Chief Curator of the Wende Museum, and I'm very pleased to be joined today with Olga Lamm. For those of you who don't know Olga yet, I'm about to introduce her, but first a few household messages. So today's program is about 1 hour. We will start with a presentation by Olga of about 20 minutes, followed by a conversation between the two of us. And then the last 50 minutes are dedicated to Q&A. At any point during the program, you can put your questions under the Q&A sign on the bottom of your screen, and I will read them aloud when we are there. Please keep them short and concise, because that makes everyone's life easier. Olga Lamm is a Moscow-born, New York-based artist who graduated from the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where she majored in graphic design and 3D design. She has worked as a freelancer on a variety of graphic design and advertising projects for publishing houses, magazines, design firms, and advertisement agencies. She has partnered with, among others, Scholastic, Universe Publishing Rizzoli, Oxford University Press, Google, Netflix, YouTube, and many more. Her commercial work has long intersected with her fine art and multimedia practice, which takes the form of digital collage, text-based installations, and animation. She is the daughter of Soviet artist Leonid Lamm, whose work is richly represented in our current exhibition, Visions of Transcendence, which presents work by artists who were or are incarcerated or unhoused in the East and the West. And we will talk about that more later during this program. But first of all, Olga, it's such a pleasure to have you here with me. And yeah, I can't wait, first of all, to see and hear your presentation and then dig in together. I hand it over to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Hughes. Really happy to share with everyone how my father influenced my work. My father had a keen wit and enjoyed playing with words. He inherited his talent for wordplay from his nanny Lucia, a woman with a sharp tongue and no formal education. She took care of him since he was 1 year old. When my father threw a temper tantrum as a kid, she would playfully tell him, "Nie psichuj," a twist on "nie psichuj," meaning "don't be crazy," but literally translates to "don't pee-pee dick." This phrase became a lasting joke within our family, and so I did all sorts of word plays. One of the examples of such wordplay is evident in the following works. In this piece, my father explores the irony within the Russian language, where the word победа, meaning victory, also includes the word beda, meaning disaster. It's basically saying that how success for one side could mean a catastrophe for another. While contemplating conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it prompted me to seek visual narratives that could tell a different story, focusing on the interconnected themes of freedom and peace. For instance, the Russian word dom, meaning home, within the English word freedom, underscores our shared planet Earth. It highlights our unity under the sun. In the word peace, mir in Russian, appears in both languages, hemispheres emphasizing its universal importance in tandem with freedom. The word mir in Russian has a double meaning, as it stands for both world and peace. When combined together with word new, it results in both a new world and new peace. In this work, I'm exploring our emotional connection with words and their impact on our environment, juxtaposing Aldous Huxley's dystopian vision titled Brave New World adapted to be rave, new word, to emphasize how words shape our global narratives. By merging Latin and Cyrillic characters, I aim to discover and shape new global narratives. This poster seeks to connect us on common ground, our shared planet Earth, finding universal language through forms and symbols. Our home is singular, planet Earth, where we all live under the same sun. Here's this work projected in Harlem, where I create immersive installations. Every passerby becomes part of the experience, leading to spontaneous interactions and dialogues. A lot of fun. Next, I would like to discuss how my dad's dollar influenced she art. In this sculpture, the hammer and sickle, an emblem of Soviet communism, are mirrored to represent the collapse of the ruble during perestroika, when the US dollar became a safe currency for many Russians as they began to lose faith in their own. Reflecting on my father's dollar and the most accepted global currency, I began to think about quantum entanglement. It's a concept where particles become interconnected and influence each other regardless of distance. Like entangled particles, our hearts synchronize in empathy and compassion, suggesting interconnectedness among individuals and creating emotional bonds that transcend physical boundaries. The reflection culminated in creation of she art, where the heart symbol merges with the US dollar sign. In my representation, this emblem signifies that our hearts are our greatest assets. Through daily meditation, practice, and deep exploration of concepts as above, so below, and as within, so without, I created an animation where the symbol pulses the colors of chakras, symbolizing the profound transformative power within us and the potential for collective healing. Oh, here they are. All right. Now I will share my father's works as well as his visual, now I will share how my father's works as well as his visual dialogues with Russian avant-garde artists influenced my work. My father's immediate circle revolved around architecture as fusion of technology and art. In his unofficial work, he made geometrical abstractions inspired by his teacher, Yakov Chernikov, who was a leading artist and architect who specialized in constructivist design. My father's approach to composition was informed not only by his knowledge of art history, but also by understanding of the theory of multidimensionality. This theory views human environments as dynamic spaces imbued with micro and microwave pulsations. One of my father's key works is Sphere. Here he expresses his opposition to the two-dimensional quality of suprematism of Malevich. You could see the Malevich's piece on the right. In this piece, he transformed the flat concept of the black square, where a painting is a window onto the world a la Renaissance notion, into a painting of a dimensional sphere. To quote him, manifesting the energy of object when it reaches such concentration as to give the viewer a sense of merging real and illusory spaces. After my father's release from prison, Sundays became a special time for us. Each week, we would walk a mile from a Moscow apartment to Park Sokolniki, represented in this image. These walks were our chance for deep conversations on light, color, space, architecture, perspective, and philosophy. Given that I was only 4 when he was arrested and 7 when he returned, these outings were vital for us. They allowed us to reconnect and build a new relationship, moving beyond the distance that had grown between us. My father became both a mentor and collaborator. During a road trip out west, the scenery brought back memories of those conversations in Park Sokolniki with my dad. The expansive landscape invited contemplation of light, color, space, architecture, perspective, philosophy, like we did when we went to the park. The terrain had mystique that felt both otherworldly and familiar. It drew me in. I felt a deep connection with the man-made roads, sensing they held unexpected potential amidst the natural peaks, valleys, and monuments, prompting reflections on life's journey. I took every moment with all my senses and captured the imagery with my camera. When I got back east to my studio in New York City, I began to process my life through the impressions of that trip. The Rorschach effect in the butterfly forms suggests metamorphosis and chaos theory. Specifically, the butterfly effect as the catalyst for conveying movement and transformation from one image state to another. This dynamic shift unfolds consistently across the series, with each piece progressing sequentially. All of this takes place on backgrounds that represent dark matter in space-time, from which all life comes and returns, the great cosmic egg. Each successive image represents one of those aha moments of self-discovery when I realized, looking back, I grew a little. The series embodies my creative development, influenced by the works of my father and his visual dialogues with the great constructivist and supremative artists like Chernikov, Malevich, Lisitsky, and Tatlin. These artists sought to communicate via symbolic language, reaching beyond their geographic location. While the egg motif represents my artistic foundation, I start with an egg, basically, and with an egg here. This work is a metaphor for a spirit's journey from conception to transcendence. And finally, I would like to share my latest work that expresses my global point of view. Our universe mirrors a cosmic brain, processing vast information through interconnected networks to symbolize unity amidst diversity. I began with the human brain, a dual processor of cognition and emotion. Just as the brain integrates its hemispheres to manage complexity, integrating Eastern and Western perspectives, can address global challenges effectively, this poster message resonates. West and East, we are one. And here's an example of this image projected into the environment. And in conclusion, connecting with our hearts can ignite a shift towards global peace. By embracing empathy, compassion, and understanding, we foster respect and cooperation in our interactions. This heart-centered approach inspires positive change, encourages dialogue over discord, and lost my train of thought. This heart-centered approach inspires positive change, encourages dialogue over discord, and celebrates our differences. As we make decisions from the heart and unite across regional and cultural divides, we build a more harmonious and peaceful world, recognizing a shared humanity and common goal. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga. That was awesome. A quick question I see, and you make these very strong visual impressions by projecting your work on architecture. A lot of it seems to be religious architecture. Is there a special reason for that?
No, it has absolutely no religious meaning. It's all about just building an architecture, and it's about putting work into the environment so that it's available to everyone. That's all it's about.
And why architecture? Why is that your screen?
Why is that my screen? Because
Yeah.
to me, it's the environment. It's immersive. It's, we walk through everything and we see it. It's part of our life. And my dad started out as an architect.
True.
So architecture has always been a big part of his art and our conversations together. As a matter of fact, when I entered high school, I thought I was going to be an architect. So,
Right.
it's just kind of part of it. It's part of our environment.
Makes perfect sense to me. I actually wanted to start with a few questions about your father's work, and then specifically the works that we have in our exhibition at the Wende Museum, which all reflect back on his time in prison in the years 1973 to 1976. So, yeah, my first question to you is, why was your father in prison in the first place? How did that happen?
Well, in 1973, my parents applied for an exit visa. They really didn't see much future in for my father's art. There was no way he could show it. There was also a lot of anti-Semitism. Well, a lot is an understatement, probably, but it's more than a lot. It was really blatant. And there was no way for him to be able to show his work. There was no future. So my parents applied for an exit visa.
Right.
And about 2 weeks after, my father, basically they showed up, the Ministry of Affairs showed up at a house early in the morning, and my father was accused of setting fire in his studio. And of course, he got really nervous and he got in the car with them, and he ended up going into the precinct, and they kept him there, questioned, and then somehow my mother got him out. A few days later, he was walking back. He had a studio. We lived in Moscow. We had an apartment in Moscow, and there was also he had a separate studio where he worked. When he left the studio on the way home, he saw two men walking down the street with a woman who I guess was dressed sort of provocatively, or in their interpretation. And they basically took an umbrella and started lifting her skirt and grabbing her and all that stuff. And my father, as any decent man, a human being, got in a way. He wanted to defend the woman. So at which they attacked him. They beat him up. They dragged him into police cars came and they dragged him into the police station, threw him into the portrait of Dzerzhinsky and accused him of hooliganism. And that's kind of how it all happened.
So the street scene was a kind of provocation organized by the secret
Yes,
service.
yes,
Yeah, right. And if I'm not mistaken, you were 4 years old when your father was arrested and 7 when he came out of prison.
yes.
Did he ever, when he came back, openly speak about his experiences, or was it so traumatic that he avoided openly speaking about it?
Okay, well, my mom did something very clever to protect me. She told me actually that my father was in an artist retreat. So I didn't find out that my father was ever in prison until maybe a few days before we left, because I had a conflict with someone outside of the building where we lived, where it was brought up. And then I ran home to my mom saying, "What's going on? Why are they telling me these things?"
Right.
And she knew that we were leaving in a few days, and that's when she told me. But when we got to New York, my father would tell me, definitely share stories with me, because I saw his work. You know what I mean? When we lived in Russia, I did not see any of the work that related to his prison experience. But inadvertently, when we came here, it all kind of unfolded.
No, I understand. So what are your most striking memories of what he told you about his experiences in prison?
Well, definitely the fact that it was very traumatic to hear that my father was tortured for 3 months, tied to a bed and given tremendous amount of drugs, and they were trying to convince him that he was insane. Meanwhile, during that time, actually, my mom didn't even know where he was, because when he was arrested, it took her a while to figure out where they actually took him, because they took him to a mental hospital, prison mental hospital.
Right.
So that was pretty traumatic. I guess other stories were, I mean, really graphic, and one particularly stands out when I asked him, when he had the show at Rutgers, with his installation there, what was it like to be incarcerated? What was it like to be in the camp?
Yeah.
And he told me that they felt, that they were treated like animals. There was really no place to go to the bathroom. There were just holes set up on the field, and there was poop, and rats, and everybody was afraid to go to the bathroom. And another practice that they did is, in order to keep men calm, or so that people would not practice in homosexual activity, they brought, because there were people who were incarcerated there just for being gay,
Right.
they would bring a herd of sheep and let them run in the field, and he would watch a bunch of men running after sheep and engaging in all sorts of activity. That was probably the most traumatic thing I've heard.
Right. Now I can imagine. Was your father able at any point to work on his art in prison?
Yes, he worked on his well, it started out actually, the way he got the supplies in prison was because they found out that he was an artist, and they wanted him to decorate the signage and whatever, some of the signs in prison. So at which point my father didn't really want to do that, but he felt, since it would give him an opportunity to get some tools and maybe he could do some other work, he agreed to do that. So first he did that in prison, and then later he did that in labor camp as well.
I see. And was all his artistic practice in jail in assignment from the prison leadership, or was he also able, either openly or secretly, to work to produce work that he wanted to make?
Well, that happened really mostly. Well, he did some drawings in prison,
Right.
basically of prisoners, as you have some in your show.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And because that's how he got to know them, even though that was pretty traumatic too. Because that's how he kind of established friendship with them, because at first people who were incarcerated with him were hard. Some of them were normal people, and some of them were normal. Hardcore criminals is what I'm saying.
Sure.
I don't know if normal is the right word, or not normal, but so they would take razor blades to his eyes and put it right to his eyes and tell him, draw your fucking Jew or we'll cut your eyes out.
Oh, man.
So,
Yeah.
so it sort of became, in a way, as a way for him to save himself. So he would draw their portraits and they would send it to their families.
Right.
And then he did more work, as we've discussed before, when he later ended up at the labor camp.
Yeah, I want to come to that as well, but let me first ask you, the drawings he made and which are now part of our exhibition, how was he able to keep them or maybe get them out of prison?
Well, out of prison, that was his attorney. His lawyer helped.
Yeah.
Basically, he would go, and he would bring the supplies to him. I
Right.
mean, he got the supplies, and then he would do draw, well, he would do the installation work, quote unquote, for the prison. He would do the drawings, and whenever the lawyer would come to visit him, he would slip him his artwork. He would put it in his case and
Right.
take him out.
Nice. Yeah. I'm going to ask my colleague Gina to put up what I think is the last painting your father made of the prison courtyard.
Okay.
Here it comes. It's at the very beginning of the exhibition. It's a very powerful and impressive work. And I wondered if you could say something about the circumstances, how this work came to be, and what your father told you about this work.
Sure. Well, first of all, this work is a homage to Doré and Van Gogh. When my father, because Doré did his etching, and then when Van Gogh was in a mental institution right before he died, his brother Theo and his doctor recommended him that he may want to do something similar. So when Van Gogh agreed to do it, he actually died right after that. In the 50s, when my father graduated from the Polygraphic Institute, he went to the Pushkin Museum and he saw this work. So I'm wondering, kind of like what kind of impression it actually left on him, and he basically said that he felt that there was some kind of a similarity between his path, looking back, not at that moment when you saw it, but later when he was doing the work, he felt that there was a similarity in the story between that of Van Gogh and of his.
Right.
He also wanted to paint it because in 2010, my parents went back to Russia and they felt that Russia was returning back to its colonial ways. So it felt still topical, the situation.
Right. And I remember when you and your mother, Inessa, were at the opening of the exhibition, your mother told us that when he made this painting, which is pretty large, he was already so weak that she sometimes had to stand behind him, grab him by his shoulders in order for him not to collapse while working, right?
Yes, yes.
That's an amazing story. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. They've been, my mom has been by his side for 50 years, yeah, in many ways.
I would like to show the next image, which is a drawing of a prison cell with an imagined, that turns into an imagined art studio. And I want to ask you, Olga, to say something about this also in respect to the fact that if you look in the middle on the right side, you actually see the original artwork that formed the model for the painting we just saw.
Yes, because he did the drawing early. He actually did the drawing in prison.
Right.
The original one. And then later when we came to United States, he painted a lot of the work. He brought small sketches. And then when we moved to United States, he was actually able to realize them in large format.
Right, yeah. And what can you tell us about this particular drawing?
In all honesty, not very much.
Okay, no, okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. Yeah, I thought it is so fascinating because it is his prison cell, which is very confined. And looking at his work, I imagined that he, just through the power of his fantasy, imagined to be in an art studio with all his work in a magnificent way, shared on the walls.
I think my father had, a lot of, how do I say it? My father was really a very free spirit, so, and really with a lot of fantasy. So, he definitely created a lot of plans for himself. My father was a person who always looked for solutions, you know what I mean? And he always visualized, you know what I mean? Even when things were hard in any way, he would always say, I just know something good is coming. I don't know what it is, but it's coming.
It's great.
So,
Right. And then I wanted to show a final image, which is from a series of drawings he did in reference to Dostoevsky's novel, The House of the Dead. And
yeah.
Dostoevsky wrote that novel in part while he was himself in prison. So how did this experience motivate him to make this series, and how did he maybe mix the stories by Dostoevsky with his own experiences in prison?
Yeah, well, while he was I believe actually he did this when he was in labor camp already. I'm not sure, so you know, but I know that he got a book, you know, and he read it. My father read it while he was in prison,
Right.
and Dostoevsky wrote this book, I believe actually when he came out, but it was based on a journal of the man whose notes he took from, who was there for murdering his wife. But what it's really about is that my father felt from the book that he read that the stories of the experience were very much the same. You know, how people were treated in prison. So
Right.
he felt a very deep connection with it. So he wanted to make his version of that, to show that. So he did all the sketches.
It's a magnificent series, and I think you can see here very well that your father was also very accomplished in terms of book illustrations.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. He illustrated over 500 books while we lived in the Soviet Union.
Right. And of course, looking at the perspective here, you can also imagine that he must have been an architect as well.
Yes, yes. He studied architecture. And also you could see here that the black form inside is basically what's outside, the white, is the notes of Dostoevsky, and the black forms inside is what's actually happening in prison. So my father wanted to show two environments. As you
Right.
see, that black form kind of changes throughout the entire series.
Yeah, he called this black form the black holes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I think it's remarkable that the style of these works that references prison time is very different from the works you showed earlier in your presentation. And can you say a little bit about um, why we see this radical difference in style? Did he choose deliberately a more realist style to share his experiences and a more abstract style in his visionary work? Or how do you see that?
Well, I believe that originally, you know what I mean, he was taught by, you know, Yakov Chernikov, who took him to studio and where they met with Tatlin, and they had a very different, my father had a very different foundation, you know. The challenges occurred when, you know, when he was already in school. First he got, he was in the when he was studying his last year of the architecture year at the architecture program, he was actually kicked out, and he wasn't able to pursue that education because he had a group of friends who wrote letters and describing uh, how bad things are, to put it mildly, and
Right.
he decided not to inform on them. So for that, he was kicked out. So then he went and he started working on his landscapes. And from there, he began to work on his, he met Chernikov, and he first started working with him, helping him with his projects, and then took his own approach in dialogue with him. And that's how it all kind of shaped out.
Right. I understand.
And I think the prison situation really, there's a lot to say about that. What is really incarceration and how do we look at it? What kind of metaphor it is for our life? But and I don't know why my father, and his faith took him to that, because he was always in search of freedom, and why his life put him in the situation where he had to experience such contrast to begin with.
Right.
But I believe that when we came to United States already, he did both. He did his works. He realized his works that he did in prison on larger format, but he continued, as I showed early in the presentation, in like the image with the park, Sokolniki. That was already done in 1987. So that was 5 years after we came here. So he did different kind of work. It's just, I think that he's more known for his prison work, but my father did a lot of other kind of work.
Therefore, it was great that you showed this other side of his oeuvre as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit how you and your family managed to immigrate in 1982?
Well, the actual process.
Yeah, and because your father already applied much earlier for an immigration visa, and that was refused. Why did it work in 1982?
Oh, I believe that they probably, I'm assuming here now, but which I really usually do not like to do, but I think that they probably, I think how much more what else could be done? You know what I mean?
Okay.
Basically my parents, my father at this point illustrated a book, and it was published in the United States. So my parents right away knew that if anyone was going to find out, that they both, stand incarceration. So they applied for a visa, and literally a few months later, as a matter of fact, the way it happened is when my father did his last Dostoevsky piece, and it says it says something about I don't remember the exact words there, but it says new life. There's the last sentence there.
Right.
My parents were at home. My mom said, now go to the mailbox and take out our permission to leave the country.
Wow.
He went to the mailbox. He came back laughing with paper saying, I don't know how it happened. It just did. I don't know how my mother saw it. I don't know how it all came about, but it did. Magic.
Yeah, meant to be for sure. Yeah. So you mentioned the concept of freedom, or the word freedom, and how was it for you personally to grow up in the Soviet Union in such a restrictive and anti-Semitic context, and what did you experience in that sense?
Well, first of all, I had no idea I was Jewish. I didn't even know, because I was very little, The
Right.
only time I ever heard the word Jew in Russia was when kids ran through hallways and they would get into fights with each other, and they would call each other Jew, because to me, so basically you call somebody an idiot, you just say that you're a Jew. You know what I mean? So that's the whole thing of religion was not practiced or allowed in the Soviet Union. So I didn't even know, everybody hid really their identity as much as they could, so that so they could leave as peacefully as they can. Having said so, few things happened. Well, when I was in kindergarten, one time it was Lenin's birthday. They put us in a circle. We all sat together, and there was a picture of Lenin right to the left. And this, our teacher or instructor, how we want to call it, in kindergarten, said, well, this is your grandfather, and yada yada yada. And all I remember is raising my hand and saying, "Why is he my grandfather? He's not my mother's and my father's father. Why do I have to accept him?" I just really wanted to know, and my question was ignored. By the time I got home, my mother was called to the kindergarten the next day, and basically I was expelled because they were, my mom said, well, why are you expelling her? She asked you a normal question. Why can't you just answer your doctrine that you are advocating for here?
Right.
And the director of the kindergarten said, you're absolutely right, but we can't have that around. We can't have that here. So she take her out. You have to take her somewhere else. Another situation came. This was probably about maybe 5 years or so later. I was in art school. And this was like an after school program. We would go and, they would teach kids, take art classes and stuff like that. So, and for some reason, and I was growing up around my father. So whatever work I did at home was very different than all of a sudden here I was to go and be educated, in the art school. I didn't understand why to begin with, because all I really wanted to do was play sports. But they would sit us down and we had to do still lifes. So I would get really bored with it and I would do very abstract forms, whatever I was seeing, because I wanted to have a good time. I actually never looked forward to going to that school, but I did because I felt like, parents put me in there, so I have to be there. I have to do my thing. So after this happened over and over again, the teacher called my mother to school and said that we can't tolerate this here. You have to take your child out because she has an American aesthetic. My mother goes, what are you talking about? What American aesthetic? She doesn't even know what that is. Right. And they said, well, it does not fall within context of what we're teaching here. So you have to take her out.
Wow. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for that story. We are about to move to the Q&A, but I want, before we do that, I want to ask you one last question.
Yes.
Of course, your work, at least in part, is very much in conversation with the work of your father. But generally speaking, what would you say is the imprint of your experience in the Soviet Union, be it in a positive or a negative way, in your own art practice?
Identity, because growing up, I was told who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to act, and I felt like I could never express it because there were so many guidelines, so many things that I had to follow, that my work really is about identity and realizing yourself and your own evolution and your own transformation outside of the templates, of the conventions that I should be able to learn and educate myself and express myself any way I want to, and not be confined by the doctrines that are being hold, you know what I mean, by the rest of the systems. So yes, the most important thing for me is evolving my true identity, because it never stops.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a question from Embo Brof Hajel, who asked, where was your father incarcerated?
He was incarcerated in Moscow, and then he was taken all the way to outside of Moscow, many hours away, to Rostov-on-Don, to the labor camp.
Right. Then we have a question from Ilya Goris. In what ways did anti-Semitism affect your father's career, given that he was an accomplished book illustrator and had an apartment and studio in Moscow?
Well, how did it, what was the question? How did it?
The question is, in what ways did anti-Semitism affect your father's career, given the fact that he was able to be an accomplished book illustrator, and he had an apartment and a studio in Moscow, which sounds like that he was pretty successful.
Oh, I guess it's somehow because of his just raw talent. That's all I have to tell you. Because it was challenging, and he was, yet there was a lot of challenges to overcome, but somehow his art is really what spoke for itself. Because when something moves, I guess, if you're a publisher and someone could do work that gets attention and educates people, because a lot of his work were actually, a lot of the books that he did were education books on math and sciences. My father had an amazing education, in fantasy. So somehow he was able to get past through some of the things, but there were still obviously a lot of challenges because, he did it within limits. He just did it really well.
No, I get it. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. As we are currently out of viewer questions, I have one for you where I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. So you had a lot of conversations with your father, and in some of your artworks, you directly respond to his work. Where would you say is the point that your two trajectories went apart? And where did you think, okay, this is my path, this is my way, and this is different from what I know my father was aiming to do?
Well, I think that my father always looked for, he wanted to find separation where how he could be by him, how he could be as an individual
Right.
by himself. My work, I think, probably be growing up here and doing my own spiritual practice and whatever else, I look for identity within unity. My path is to find, be universal but self-contained. I believe he was looking where he is outside, if that makes sense. And at the end of the day, my father was always in conversation with other artists, and it was that what was most important is to create or work within through art history within the language of itself and evolve it. And I continue doing the same thing. It's kind of like a legacy, if that makes sense, where you continue evolving what your predecessors started.
Sure.
So I'm doing my own version. I'm doing my own version of continuing dialogue. I will always be in dialogue with my father. It's just in my own way, but I'm also talking to the environment that I'm in, because I'm a different person. But
Yeah.
somehow I'll always be with my father. He's always with me, as his predecessors.
Right, right. We have a question from Rick Feldman, who asked, is there a New York gallery that handles your work?
Well, right now, no, because basically what I've been focusing on is just going out into the street and just making out work available to people for free. We'll see what the future brings. But right now, it's a lot of fun to do improv stuff and just take the work to the people, to show it to them and engage in conversations and seeing how the spontaneity of it all, the being in the moment. When people walk up and, sometimes they say something simple like, oh, cool. Other people will start asking questions, what it's about. And even if I go and I project on the same building the next day, it would be a completely different situation. It would be the environment would change. So the play on that, the spontaneity, the unexpected is really a lot of fun right now. That's what I'm doing.
I understand. Nice. Beautiful. We have another question by Amber Hajal. She says, this is such a wonderful personal conversation. Have you ever thought of writing an entire book about this? Or I'd love to see a documentary focused around the relationships within your family.
Oh, well, I definitely thought about it, and one day I think I probably will write a book, but I have so many things. I mean, I'm working all the time. I would do it at work, but one day I would love to write a book and do a movie. I've talked to some friends about movies and stuff, so we'll see where that takes us. But and definitely whether it's going to be a biography or a documentary, I think both could be really good. Just because that he was able to, there's so much body of work, and there are a lot of stories of what actually happened. It's just, I think my mom has more info on that. He shared more with her, and my mom has letters,
Right.
that could be used for that as well.
No, I think it's an excellent question, and I always also want to share that in the preparation of our exhibition through our conversations with you, Olga, and with your mother. We got such rich documentation of the works and such incredible stories that we were able to share on our exhibition labels. So it really made a very impactful contribution to our exhibition.
That's wonderful.
That's
wonderful. My dad would be really happy.
I have another question here, which asks, what did your father or all of you think of the United States when you all arrived? Was the transition difficult?
Well, the transition was definitely difficult because first of all, we went from Moscow, we went to Austria, and from Austria went to Italy, where we stayed quite a while because since my father had history, of someone who was incarcerated, we had to get a lot of paperwork together because the United States wouldn't let criminals into the country. So somehow we had to prove that my father was not actually a criminal, that he was a political prisoner.
Right.
But the challenge, there was definitely a lot of challenges. They let us out with $100 a person. We had no money, we were totally broke. We got a lot of the stuff we got off the street to put into our first apartment.
Yeah.
The first TV we had came from from outside of the building. So yes, there was a lot of challenges, but fairly soon my father got a job at Associated Press as an illustrator, and it was challenging because he wasn't making as much money as other people who were working there, but he got a lot of work, so that helped us a lot. And slowly, but my father was in his 50s when he came to United States, so language barriers, there's a lot of stuff that had to be overcome, and then they had to deal with me on top of that.
Maybe that's a great sentence to end this interview. Olga, I want to thank you so much for a wonderful conversation and presentation by you.
Thank you.
Also, I want to thank the viewers, and a special thanks to Rick Feldman and Susan Horowitz for always so generously sponsoring our online and on-site programs. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, too. Thank you so much.